Hey guys, welcome back. The Curt Schilling Baseball Show is ready to roll. Hey Bill, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, Curt. Up late last night watching ball, up early this morning watching ball. It's been a good 24
Yeah,
hours.
great 24 hours for everybody on the planet but Mets fans. So we're down to six. Um, couple maybe surprises. I'm not really stunned by it, but you got what? Cuba and Japan are going to play over in Asia.
Yep.
The USA gets Venezuela. And Puerto Rico plays Mexico. Those are the final six. I got to tell you, there's a lot more excitement around this than I was expecting. I don't know if maybe that's just maybe baseball's doing a good job PR, but people are. I got a couple people that I know that have watched every inning of every game they can watch, and
I'll tell you, I remember 2017, and I don't remember it having this much buzz. So
yeah,
congrats to MLB
yeah,
for putting it in this position. But the games have also all been compelling.
right. Right. You've gotten well, yeah, and I'm going to just start where everybody knows I'm going to start. I said it on the first show, and I would say it forever. I would never, ever, ever allow a pitcher in my organization to pitch in this thing. Now, there's exceptions to every rule. And Adam Wainwright at 41, Lance Lynn, okay, you've been around long enough that go ahead, but last night, the Dominican Puerto Rico game, which Puerto Rico won, by the way, upsetting Dominican. I'm not sure. Again, I think in a regular season when everybody's going, I don't think it's even close. I think Dominican rolls over everybody. But Puerto Rico beats them, and it was one of those wow, what happened kind of things as you're watching the celebration. And out of the celebration, you see Edwin Diaz of the New York Mets on the ground. Apparently, he has a clean ruptured tear of his patella tendon and is out for the year. And just like that, the Mets will show up at the Zach Britton tryout. And I'm laughing, but it's not funny. It's sad. It really is. I hate to see stuff like this happen. And this is also why, if you're a gambler, you can take your long odds pre-spring training, but you're making two bets. You're betting on the team that you're betting on being healthy at the end of camp, which never happens. And then you're betting the odds at the end of camp. And this is why you don't. Buck will find a way. They'll find somebody. Buck can manage a bullpen. That's probably, excuse me, if I'm a Mets fan, that's the one thing I think, Bill, that I would be taking a breath on. I mean, you saw Gary, I'm sure one of the gentlemen who is my boss at OutKick, Gary is a huge Mets fan, and I'm sure he took a gulp. But if there's any solace to take, it is the fact that Buck Showalter can manage a bullpen as well as anybody I've ever met. So there is that.
Well, the other thing, Curt, you and I were talking about is this kind of an injury doesn't happen in spring training.
It doesn't. It doesn't. And the people listening are going to go, oh, of course it could. Well, it really couldn't. I mean, you had Jabba Chamberlain who was jumping up and down on a trampoline and blew out, but he's kind of a box of rocks. So that's a one-off. This just doesn't happen. It's just one of those things that again, you're talking about emotions and intensity that aren't normal for March. And you can poop with that all you want and talk about coddle athletes, but the fact of the matter is you have a team with almost a $400 million payroll that now has lost the game's best closer. Now, here's a side note. If I were to ask Theo Epstein, who I still think is the best general manager I've ever known or been around, if I were to ask him on day one of spring training, you have to go into the season without a position player, a starting pitcher, or your closer, what would it be? He would pick closer 10 out of 10 times. Because you'll find the sabermetrics guys, and you're already seeing this, they believe you can build a bullpen year to year, which you often can. But they also believe anybody can be a closer. And so they'll take you got 4 or 5 guys to swing the role. And plus, I think Buck is a guy that used the new term in the bullpen is stopper. which is a guy you might bring in the seventh inning as opposed. It's like using Mariano Rivera after the sixth inning before the ninth in the most crucial situation. That's what a stopper is supposedly these days. It's going to change some things. There's going to be some guys in New York getting an opportunity. But if that team was relying on Edwin Diaz guaranteed health for 6 months to win it all, then they weren't built to win it all. And I do believe they are. I think they'll get by it, but it's still a huge blow. And it's a huge blow for baseball. This guy is the energy and electricity. There was a Robbie Nin, San Francisco, Mariano Rivera, New York Yankees kind of vibe when he comes into the game at home in New York. And that was kind of fun to watch, but that's too bad. Hopefully he recovers. It's not a small injury. It's a huge injury, but hopefully we'll see him next year. So there's that.
Well, the other game last night, the U.S. took care of business, and their stars did the work.
The greatest player anyone alive will ever see drove in all 3 runs. Mike Trout, they beat Columbia 3-2. Trout was 3 for 4, had all 3 RBIs. Merrill Kelly gave up. It's Keller, right? Keller.
Yeah.
He gave up 2 runs in the first 3 innings. After a pretty cool story, he gets called into, and this is on video, by the way. He gets called into the manager's office, talking about his appearance in spring training, or I think his last appearance in spring training, and the coach asks him how many pitches he threw, and he's like, I don't know. And the coach says to him, how many do you think you're going to throw on the 30th? And he's like, well, what's the 30th? And he's like, it's opening day. Basically acknowledging, hey, you're going to get the ball opening day. And he was noticeably fired up. And I thought things like that bring back memories. And I love to see stuff like that. But he threw, looked good. And they won. Trout's 5 for 12 in the tournament, home run, 6 RBIs. I really feel like, except for Japan, who I think came out playing midseason baseball on game 1, the other teams are starting to catch up. I think the hitters are getting, more comfortable. I don't know that it matters if Ohtani's going to throw 102, but I still think Japan's going to end up winning it all. I just think that their pitching is ridiculous, with 3 guys, starters that are all bona fide number 1 stuff guys. But you've got USA playing Venezuela on Saturday in the quarterfinals, Puerto Rico playing Mexico. Mexico may be surprising everybody. That's a baseball country. They play baseball 12 months a year. That entire team, for the most part, came into this tournament with mid-season footing. And I think that gives them a huge advantage. A kid who a couple years ago, we were talking about this earlier, Bill, Randy Arozarena from Tampa, who had one of the greatest playoffs in the history of playoffs, as a rookie, but for anybody. He's 7 for 14 with 6 extra base hits and 9 RBIs. Now, none of this for me translates in the sense that I don't worry about spring stats at all for my position players, because they'll end up being where they are. Pitching wise, Tajon Walker has thrown well. The Philly starter has thrown 4 innings, given up a hit, punched out 8, so he's clearly feeling good. But again, I worry so much about these guys going into the season. The pitchers, but it's been a good run. Japan, Cuba. I think hands down will be the best game of the World Series. There've been some good ones, and it might be a stinker, but I think you got 2 teams that are literally in mid-season form, and they'll be going up, and there'll be phenomenal pitching, and offensively, both teams can flat out hit. So.
Well, the way that Japan is hit in this tournament, they've played 5 games and scored 47 runs.
Right. Right. And I don't know. I think bracket-wise, they might have seen some less than optimal pitching, which won't be the case with Cuba. Because I think Cuba, using an old term, is in it to win it. This is a much bigger deal in Cuba, in the Dominican, in Puerto Rico, in Japan, than it is in the United States. No matter, you can argue that all you want, but it's just not the case. Because we have 6 months of baseball coming, and I think. But I'm glad to see the response it's getting. Ohtani, he's hitting 438 with a bomb, 8 RBIs, a stolen base. He's thrown he has 10 punch out, 8 2/3. Yeah. Huh. He's given up all of 5 hits, punched out 10 with a .69 whip and a 2.08 ERA. One of the and again, another thing we were talking about, I'm not really all that concerned about his workload. He's on a different regimen and he's a different cat. I mean, he's, the Angels, the Yankees would pray and beg to be the Angels in a sense today, because the Angels are considering going with a 6-man to give him 5 days off and start every 6th day, because they have that luxury apparently, which tells me, honestly, Bill, the Angels have to feel pretty good about their pitching, which means that should be a good team this year if that's the case, because they can hit. And the fact that that's a consideration, and as it relates to the Yankees, they're just, again, with the Rodon injury, they're going to be going after it. Apparently, a late word for me that I've heard is that IKF and Volpe both have a chance to break with the team opening day.
Yeah, I heard that as well, and they're trying IKF in the outfield.
Yeah, and this, which would be that. I mean, I don't know that the Yankees as contenders are ever comfortable bringing a young guy into that spotlight, but that's talking about bringing 2 of them in, and that would be. I don't think they're the favorites to win the AL East anyway. By the way. Let's talk real quick. And again, if I'm a fan, I don't care. Guys that have struggled in the WBC. Rafael Devers for the Sox, hitting $125. Manny Machado hitting 235. He does have 2 bombs, though. Julio Rodriguez hitting 278. Don't care. You just want those guys to end camp healthy. They're getting good at bats. The power's there. Those guys, their numbers at the end. For you fantasy guys, that's irrelevant. Do not buy high on a young kid breaking in spring training, or sell low on an old guy hitting 100 at the end of camp, because opening day, everything changes. So, but do be careful when you draft your fantasy teams, and when you're gambling, to pay attention to the starting pitchers that were in the WBC. It'd be very interesting, and that those stats will come out at some point.
Yeah, we'll follow up with that later.
Yeah,
later in the year. Before we move on from the WBC, you wanted to talk about the 19-year-old Canadian pitcher, who faced the U.S.
Yeah.
So Mitch Bratt is the kid's name.
Yeah, 19 years old, by the way. 19 years old, which kind of is just stunning to me. Got to start against the U.S., which in his career and lifetime, it'll be the greatest lineup he ever faces. He has good stuff. He had what can only be described as the nightmare of nightmare outings. He got 1 out in the first. And you could see when the manager came to take him out, he was holding back tears. And you don't blame him. I mean, my God, can you imagine I can't imagine at 19 sleeping for a couple, or trying to sleep the days leading up to that game, knowing the whole world's watching. But it's I felt horrible for him. I think it was a tough situation to put him in. You never know how people are going to react to stuff like that. And that's why I try to pay attention to things like that with young pitchers in camp, because young pitchers in camp don't have a second gear. They're going all out. And this was a tough one.
Well, and this kid has a future.
Oh, yeah. No, he's legit. He was in A-ball last year.
Yep.
Had 80 innings in A-ball, punched out 99 to a 2.5 ERA. Watching him, he has stuff. He just needs to be taught, and he's with the Rangers, so he's got a Maddox or 2 on the sideline to teach. So he should be fine. Just got to keep your chin up, but that's a hard one. I felt horrible. There's a couple really good stories actually. I want to talk about the Red Sox real quick. They signed a gentleman out of Chinese Taipei, Yu Chang. and he went off. He was Group A MVP. And again, I'm not caught up in the stats, but he had 2 bombs, a grand slam, went 7 for 16. And with the middle infield stuff going on in Boston, Trevor Story had elbow surgery. He's going to be out 4 to 6 months. Adalberto Mondesi. Is that the Kansas City Royals, Mondesi?
It is. It is the Kansas City guy.
All right. He's recovering from a torn ACL. Won't be ready for the regular season. And Christian Arroyo has moved over to second. Enrique Hernandez has been moved to short, former center fielder. Yu Chang has made a name for himself. So that's kind of cool. He'll come back from this thing and probably be moved up the depth chart in a good way. So, but I shudder to think that if the Red Sox don't get optimal pitching every day of the season, they're going to be in trouble. This is my story. This is my favorite one. Dominican Republic was beating Nicaragua 6-1 at top of the 9th, and a young man came out of the pen for Nicaragua, 21 years old, with Juan Soto at the plate, Julio Rodriguez on deck, and Manny Machado in the hole. Oh, and Rafael Devers was hitting 4th that inning. He ends up punching out Soto, leading off the inning. Punches out Rodriguez on a nasty changeup. Machado doubles. He gets Devers to a 3-1 count, and then punches him out swinging to punch out the side. Detroit Scout, I'm going to read from Detroit Scout, Tiger Scout Luis Molina is a coach on the Nicaraguan team. After the game, the Tigers offered the 21-year-old a contract. I mean, that is so cool, especially when you see and read that a lot of these kids and guys were plumbing, were working at a hardware store, were farming or something like that. Great story. Out of the Czech Republic, there was a couple great stories. But that to me is one of the reasons why, for me, the WBC is a cool thing, because of stuff like that happening. I hate to when it rains it pours, or to pile on. But the Mets, Jose Quintana is going to be out a while, and this is. I would tell you that if you're a fan of a team and a pitcher gets hurt, I would almost rather it be somewhere other than the core. And by that, I mean, Quintana suffered a stress fracture in his rib. And basically, a stress fracture is something that will show up with a heat signature. It's generally not a clean break or anything like that. And, I could be mislabeling a little bit, but it'll show up as a stress fracture. It's like a heat signature and it's very painful. He has a stress fracture in his rib. And then, which wasn't the big deal, it turns out, because as I guess they did an MRI and a couple other things, they found a lesion in his lungs near the fracture. Fortunately, it was benign, but recovery is going to be extended and lengthy. And they're saying he'll be out until at least July. God, to me, that would be all things happen perfectly. Best case possible ever would be July. You're looking, if he's back for a September call-up, I would feel very good if I was a Mets fan. But that leaves the Mets rotation with Verlander, Scherzer, Kodai, Senga, Carrasco, and Peterson as the guys fighting for the back end of those spots. Obviously, hey, I think the top 3, this Senga kid's going to be something. I think Verlander, Scherzer, Senga, there's going to be kind of it's funny when you talk to hitters, they'll know if Verlander's starting on Friday, the guys know on Monday they're facing him. Same thing with Scherzer. They still got a chance, but that the Quintana injury obviously doesn't help, and the Diaz stuff is just, I don't know. That I think is tragic in every possible way and not good for the games. We're going to close out with, as we have a couple different times and started and recently, and as well, you can go to OutKick.com. Or you can find Bill on Twitter or me on Twitter, as I'll forward them to Bill and ask questions. Bill, we got a couple questions to close out the show?
Sure. Let's start with C. Lee. He said, when you're evaluating a pitcher, what aspects of his delivery do you look at to determine if he has good or bad mechanics?
A couple things. Good question, by the way. First, for me, the first thing is tempo. How quickly a guy's delivery takes. Mine was very slow and easily repeated. I look for simplicity of movement, tempo, and effort level. I want, as a pitcher, you want to be able to repeat your mechanics, and so it's very much simple math. If I move slowly, I have much less chance of creating a mistake, and I have a much less chance of changing or creating bad momentum. If my delivery takes 22 different moves, that's going to be more complicated than a delivery that takes 5. And so for me, it was all about from the windup, creating slower tempo and having a very simple, because you got to be able to repeat your delivery. That's probably the most important thing. And finally, effort level. I always use the analogy: if you look at a whiteboard and you draw a doorway, stand behind the mound and put that doorway around the pitcher's rubber. There's a tunnel to the plate where all of a pitcher's energy should go. Pitching is math. Everything's a 90-degree angle, right? And I learned this listening to Greg Maddux and reading what things he said. Everything's a 90-degree angle. Everything happens on this plane or that plane. So when I step to the side and I bring my leg up and then I go home, I want everything to happen inside that doorway. And the reason it's not happening is if you just look at the mound as a doorway from home plate or from behind, when the pitcher ends his delivery, he should still be in the doorway. And that just, for a lot of guys, it doesn't happen. You'll see them, they'll fall way outside or on either side, depending on their hand, and what that tells you is their momentum and energy is actually headed in this direction as opposed to this one. It's costing you velocity and it's costing you control. And it's also just not healthy for you. Go back and watch, and I know I'm dating myself again. You go back and watch a video of Maddux or watch a video of Clemens or some of the best ever. They're literally, they become a ninth fielder the second they let go of the baseball. And that's a big thing. Yeah. So those are things I look for. The other thing that to pay attention, well, you can't really pay attention to it, is collagen and body composition. Everybody's different. Collagen is the tissue that holds the fiber that holds your tissue together, and all things go with that. But also, you have your rotator cuff and your labrum. The rotator cuff used to be the end of a career. It's still a very, very significant and serious injury, and generally it's very hard to come back and be the same pitcher. The labrum is much more common, and the injuries in labrum are created by instability. Now, there's kind of one cool thing. I learned this when I was 13 years old, Bill. So your bicep attaches up to your labrum in your shoulder, and your labrum is kind of your shock absorber. When your shoulder socket moves around in the socket, when your humerus moves around the socket, the labrum is the thing that buffers it and all the things that go with that. When you have a tear, it gets pinched. Now, what happens is usually where your bicep attaches to your labrum, it'll tear off and create instability, and you have to go in and have what's called a slap repair. A very small portion of people are born with, and I can't think of the name of it, but it's called a cat's muscle in slang. And what that means is my bicep, and I found this out at 13 from an x-ray, my bicep comes up to the top, and instead of one anchoring to the labrum, my bicep splits in 2 and anchors twice. So it's a much more stable environment for the shoulder. Now, the cool thing was, when I was playing, I remember talking to a doctor about this, and apparently like 17% of people are born with that, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 or 80% of pitchers in the Major League Baseball have it. So, and then watch, all these parents are going to go out and get their kids MRI'd and X-rayed and find out if they have it. But I thought that was kind of cool. But that's what I look for. And for what it's worth, when you're watching pitchers that show up with an immediate elbow injury or an elbow problem, 99 times out of 100, that's not the problem. Starts in the shoulder, instability in the shoulder. The instability in the shoulder allows the arm to move in unintended ways, which causes the problems with the elbow nerve. So, yeah, good question. But tempo, I like tempo and speed, slow speed, repeatable delivery, and effort level.
Unbelievable description there, Curt. That's all we're going to have time for this week. Okay. Really good discussion.
I do want to, yes. The next week, I will tell you who the best athlete I ever saw on the baseball field was on the next show.
Excellent.
So, guys, go to OutKick.com. There should be a link on the top to the Curt Schilling Baseball Show, or you can go to over on the top tab to shows, click on shows, and it'll show you all the podcasts. There's a bunch of phenomenally good podcasts. Dan Kakich, the OutKick 360 guys, obviously Clay, Tommy, and you can find the baseball show on there as well.
Perfect. Good show, Curt. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, brother.